Hi again then guys, and welcome to the third of the updated money earning tunes that I'm going to do for Gran Turismo Sport. And as promised, of course, we had to get around at some point to the KTM X-Bow. It's one of the most popular ones for earning cash, but I will say before we go any further, if you've been doing this for some time and you can afford to, I would strongly recommend buying the GT40 instead and use my tune for that, because it's definitely better. It's faster, at least in my experience. It's a lot easier, a lot less taxing, you could say, after running it race after race. Whereas with the KTM, you've constantly got to focus on how you're driving it. You've got to pay a lot of attention to the other drivers because it's a very temperamental car. Now, I spent quite some time trying to readjust the tune from scratch, but ultimately I found that just making a couple of changes to the existing tune was the better route to go with. So, as far as the upgrades, of course you want it in N300, the peak of N300. Drop the weight as much as you can to help through corners in particular, to increase that average speed. Traction control I've got turned off. Of course that'll vary from driver to driver. As far as the tyres, racing hards on the front, racing softs on the back. Very different to my other ones, but you definitely want to do that on this car. It makes a huge difference. In particular, swap the front tyres and you'll see what I mean. It makes a massive difference. As far as the suspension, we've got the ride height as low as possible, front and rear. As far as the frequency, we've got that on 2, front and rear. Anti-roll as high as possible. As far as the dampers, we've got the compression as low as possible, the rebound as low as possible, neutral camber, which might be surprising given the existing tune has quite a bit of camber, and of all the cars that I've tuned you would probably assume that this one would need to keep a lot of camber, but it actually doesn't. And as far as tow, we've gone neutral there as well. You can't adjust the downforce. Kind of a shame, but there you go. As far as the diff, I've gone for the lowest settings on all three, and the diff makes a huge difference to this car, but I would recommend trying what I've done and then adjusting it as necessary, because of course, if you do try something else and then it doesn't work, you can always just come back to this, or if you already know your own version, you could combine it with elements of this tune to make kind of a Frankenstein build out of it. And then of course for the gearbox, it's essentially what it already was, so an auto setting of 186. I would recommend actually dropping that to an auto setting of 180, which just tightens up the gears a little bit more, especially if you like to use auto, as I do. It'll kick it up into 6th gear a little bit earlier. Plus, in the Blue Moon Bay event, slipstream doesn't really work. I'm pretty sure it's set on weak anyway, or normal, but it has very little effect, so it doesn't really matter about draft potential. So that's it for the tune. But with the KTM, it's as much about how you use it as what you actually do. So let's take it out to the race itself to get to that side of things. Now, the reason why I did the disclaimer at the start of this video about using the GT40 instead, or even something like the Miura in N300 as well, is it's just not worth the effort. Now, I know a lot of people love to use the KTM. It's certainly the most pro approach, the most challenging. It keeps you on your toes, and for some people that probably makes cash earning more interesting rather than monotonous. But ultimately, as I said before, I would strongly recommend trying the GT40 at least. If not using it all the time, just give it a chance. If you do decide to use this one, it's very much so about how you use it as well as just tuning it. The car does not do the work for you like the GT40 does. So as far as cornering, for the first corner, which of course is the tightest of the three, you want to brake relatively early, pretty much as soon as the braking indicator starts flashing. Turn in very tight to the corner, and this is the challenging part as far as pushing yourself, because you actually need to give it the throttle and accelerate before you think you need to, because you can take that corner at about 120 miles per hour exit speed. It doesn't feel like the car will do it though, because the handling, despite having no camber at all, is very heavy, and that's partially due to the difference in tyres. But the problem is, if you move it up to racing mediums, it makes a massive difference. So there could be a sweet spot between there, which of course is one of the reasons why I always encourage people to try out the tune, test different things, rerun it, make your own little tweaks. That's the beauty of having a massive community all tuning the same thing, for the same race especially. Now, as far as the second corner, it's not really a corner. You can take it smooth and fast, about 170 miles per hour. And then for the final one, the final corner in particular, that long sweeping one before the finish line, That corner in particular, with the KTM, definitely more so than any of the other cars, is where you make up the most ground, because you can essentially take that corner at around 145, 150 miles per hour. You just need to basically push the car as hard as it can go, and just back off the throttle maybe once or twice, just a little bit, even half throttle can do it sometimes, and the car will basically carry itself through the corner. But make sure that all of your adjustments, all of your steering with the KTM is smooth, because although it feels heavy, it's still temperamental, so overcorrecting the car, you are guaranteed to spin out. Now the disadvantage of this car, and potentially of this tune, is it's still not as quick as the GT40. Now I'm sure for some people you could definitely get it to go quicker than me, but as I said, I just don't personally consider the car to be worth the effort. The only advantage is the price. So if you do want to use it, I hope you have a ton of fun with it. If you want to try my existing tune, of course, you can find that in this playlist at the end by clicking through. But that's it for this build, and I'll see you next time. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.